Hey guys, it's Courtney here from Flynn-It, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to knit a swatch in the round. But before we get into the actual swatching, I just want to give you a few details about why this is so important. Anytime we're about to work on a project that is knit in the round, such as a hat, a sweater, or a cowl, we want to swatch in the round. And we want to do this because we want our swatch to be as reflective as possible of our finished piece, to give us the most information about our gauge so we can achieve the same gauge as the pattern and get the correct sizing and fit. We basically want our swatch to be a mini version of our finished piece, and to do that, we have to knit it the same way. So if you knit a swatch flat for a project that is going to be knit in the round, your swatch is not going to give you the information you're looking for and can lead to problems with gauge. And let me show you what I mean. So when you're knitting a stockinette swatch flat, you knit on the right side, then you turn your work over and you're going to purl on the wrong side. And working two different types of stitches, knits and purls, can alter your tension and affect your gauge. But when you're knitting a stockinette swatch in the round, you knit all the stitches on the right side, so your tension will remain more even and give you a better idea of the gauge you'll achieve on that finished piece. Okay, so let me show you how to get started. You'll need a set of circular needles, the same size tips as called for in your pattern, and the same yarn you're using for your pattern. You don't want to use another brand or another type of yarn in the same weight category. I know sometimes knitters may feel like they don't want to waste the yarn they're using for their project, so they use another kind of yarn for their swatch. But that is not going to do you any favors, and it won't give you accurate gauge information. So just budget a little extra yarn from your project for that swatch. And I'd also recommend that if you plan to use bamboo tips, for example, to knit your finished piece, use bamboo tips to knit your swatch. Again, we basically want this swatch to be as reflective as possible of our finished piece, so we need to use all the same tools and materials. So now we'll begin by casting on some stitches, and I would refer to your pattern to figure out how many you want to cast on for your swatch. So for example, if the stitch gauge in your pattern is 18 stitches per 4-inch square, that gives you a starting point to cast on at least 18 stitches. And I always recommend, say, 4 to 5 extra stitches on either side to give you some wiggle room, as the edges can get a bit wonky. And I definitely recommend knitting a swatch of roughly 5 inches square or larger to get the best idea of your gauge. A tiny 1-inch or 2-inch square is not going to give you the information you need because it represents such a small area of your finished project. Okay, so for this tutorial, I have cast on 25 stitches. And to begin knitting our swatch in the round, all we want to do is take those stitches and slide them to the other end of our circular needles. And to start out, it can be a little bit wonky at first, but it will get easier as we get further knit in our fabric. And we are going to insert our needle into that first stitch. And we want to bring that working yarn kind of loosely behind us, behind that cord, and just begin knitting those stitches. So we're going to knit across, and as you can see, I've got this like loop behind me that will create more and more loops, but we're going to knit across, and then when we get to the end, we are going to slide our work to the other side of our needles again, and I will meet you back here once I've knit across these stitches. Okay, so I've knit across all of those stitches, and all I'm going to do now is slide them to the other side of my needles. And then we are going to begin knitting again across those stitches, and again I just insert my needle here, leave a nice loop with lots of slack behind it, and loop it around my needle, and then knit across those stitches. So we're just going to keep knitting across and sliding, knitting and sliding. So here's another swatch I wanted to show you so you can see how it looks further along. And it's got all of these loops on the back, and it's got our nice stockinette square starting to form here on the front. And the most important thing is, again, that all of these stitches are knit. So you're always knitting on this right side, and you're never turning it and purling it. You're simply bringing that working yarn around, which creates all of those loops. So you get the effect of knitting in the round. And once you're done knitting your swatch, you simply bind off, and then you can use your scissors to cut through the middle of all of these loops on the back. And once you cut through all those loops on the back of your work, you can open it up, and that's what gives you all this fringe on the edges. And now you have your nice finished swatch. And once you're done, I definitely recommend blocking your swatch the same way you plan to block your finished project. So if you plan to steam block your finished project, steam block your swatch. Don't wet block it. And remember, you want this swatch to be a mini version of your finished piece, so you need to knit it the same way, use the same needles, use the same yarn, and block it the same way. Then after you're done blocking your swatch, you can measure your gauge to make sure it matches the pattern. And if it doesn't, you can adjust your needle size and knit another swatch. So if the stitch gauge is 18 stitches per 4-inch square and you've knit 22 stitches, you would increase your needle size. If you only knit 14 stitches, you'd want to decrease your needle size. And I know it can be frustrating to knit another swatch, but I promise that you will be much happier with your finished piece if you take the time in the beginning to make sure your swatch gauge matches that pattern gauge. In any case, I hope you found this tutorial helpful, and I can't wait to share more with you next time. Follow me on Instagram at Flinnit to see what I'm working on next.